Are you wondering when to use worse versus worst? Even some native English speakers make mistakes with these. So today I'll teach you how to use them correctly with lots of examples, and we'll learn some common phrases and expressions with worse and worst.
Hi, and welcome to the Espresso English podcast, where you can improve your English in just a few minutes a day. My name is Shayna, and I'm the teacher at Espresso English. Make sure to visit the website espressoenglish.net, where you can get online courses and ebooks that will help you learn English even faster. Let's get started with today's lesson.
And I've got a little bonus for you, a free PDF download with the text of this lesson as well as a quiz to help you practice worse and worst. Go ahead and click the link under this video, enter your email address to get that free PDF download. Okay? We'll start with worse, ending with E. Worse is a comparative adjective, and we use it when we compare two things. For example, the second book in the series was worse than the first one. Killing someone is worse than stealing from them. Her previous boyfriend was annoying, but her current one is worse. The food at this restaurant has gotten worse over the past few months. So as you can see, we often use worse in these sentence structures. A is worse than B. A is bad and B is worse. It's getting worse, describing the process of becoming worse compared to how it was before. Now some students ask, is worser a word? No. We add ER to many English words to form comparative adjectives, big, bigger, tall, taller. But worse is already a comparative. Bad is the adjective and the comparative is worse. So we can't say worser. It doesn't exist. However, we can say even worse to add extra emphasis to how bad the second thing is. For example, I was already sad, and after hearing about the tragedy, I felt even worse. Here are a few more expressions using worse. We have the phrase, it could be worse. This means the situation is not so terrible. For example, my job is kind of boring, but it could be worse. At least I have a job. So my job is kind of boring, but it could be worse. Maybe I don't have a job at all, so my situation is not quite as bad. To be worse off means to be in a worse situation. So no matter how bad things are, there's always someone worse off than you. For better or worse means whether the situation is good or bad. For example, we promised to stay married for better or worse. Take a turn for the worse means when a situation begins going more badly. For example, the doctors thought he was recovering, but then his health took a turn for the worse. Now let's look at worst, ending with T. Worst is a superlative adjective used when we compare something to multiple other things. Let's look at some examples. He is the worst player on the team. That's the worst movie I've ever seen. She's the worst employee I've ever hired. This was the worst earthquake in history. So we typically say the worst. Don't forget the word the, because it's a common error to say things like, he is worst player on team. That's incorrect. He is the worst player on the team. When talking about your experiences, it's common to use the structure, the worst thing I've ever, and then the verb in the past participle. The worst movie I've ever seen. The worst employee I've ever hired. The word worst is also used in these expressions. Worst of all. So this is the worst thing in a series of bad things. For example, our flight was delayed and our luggage was lost. Worst of all, it rained the entire time we were on vacation. We have the phrase, if worst comes to worst. This means if the worst situation happens. For example, if worst comes to worst and both of you die in an accident, who will take care of your kids? If someone wants something in the worst way, it means they really want it very much. For example, my brother's car is really old. He wants a new one in the worst way. It means he really, really wants it. It's the worst, or that's the worst. This phrase means this is a very bad thing. We usually say it's the worst when talking about our own bad situation, and that's the worst when responding to someone else talking about their bad situation, to show that we sympathize. For example, if I'm talking about my own experience, I could say, Every time I call my bank, I'm on hold for an hour. It's the worst. But if my friend tells me, ugh, this new medication I'm taking is making me nauseous all day, I could respond, oh, that's the worst. And worst case scenario, not worst case, worst case. This means the most negative situation possible. We often use this expression when talking about fears or planning things to avoid it or fix it if it does happen. We have an emergency savings account so we can survive if the worst case scenario happens, like we both lose our jobs at the same time. All right, what about the pronunciation of worse and worst? Well, worse ends with a s sound and worst ends with a st sound, worst. However, when speaking fast, it's common for that final T to just disappear. So sometimes worst just sounds like worse when we're speaking fast. But an easy way to know when someone is saying worse, comparing two things, and when someone is saying worst, comparing one thing to multiple other things, is by considering the whole structure of the sentence. So if they say that one thing is worse than another, they're comparing two things, worse than. If they say something is the worst, then they're comparing one thing to all other things. All right, now that you know all about worse versus worst, it's time to test your knowledge by downloading that free PDF and trying the quiz. The link to get that is under this video. When you click on it and enter your email address, I'll send the PDF right to your email. The opposite of worse is better, and I'm here to help your English get better. You can learn more when you join one of my online courses. Get more information and free sample lessons by visiting espressoenglish.net. I have courses to help you improve all your English skills, from grammar to vocabulary, speaking, listening, reading, and much more. I hope you liked today's lesson. Make sure to subscribe, and I hope to see you inside one of my courses.
If you want more great English lessons, visit espressoenglish.net, where you can sign up by email to receive a free ebook with 500 plus real English phrases. You'll also find online courses to help you improve your English fast, even if you don't have much time to study. Keep practicing your English, and I hope you have a wonderful day.